Hello there. You know who we are. Do we need to tell you? Well,
Yeah.
we like saying this. Yes, we do. We are the four storytellers, scratching deeper into the fabric of our lives to generate diverse stories and unique characters using our wildly individual and distinct voices. And each of us definitely has a distinct voice. I mean, we have Del Shores. How do you describe yourself, Del?
Oh, the dramatist. I was going to say white trash, asshole. I mean, I'm not sure what you
Save that for the family talk.
Dramatist.
Okay, Sydney.
I am the amateur in every way that counts.
I don't know. I think you're getting your legs.
I'm getting my legs.
You
They're
are.
a little stubby, and I keep falling. But
What legs they are. Okay, Jane.
The philosopher.
Because.
That's what I did for a long time.
Philosophize.
Philosophize. Yeah.
You have a very calming. I think he's our calming presence. Wouldn't you say? Doesn't he kind of keep us in check?
I think if he had lived in biblical days, he would have had his own chapter in the New Testament.
Read that, everybody. That's a good one.
So, Miss Nancy, what are we talking about today?
Well, because we're all right. I think writing is personal. Anything you write about, there's going to be some of you in it, whether it's true or not. And we each have our own ways of doing that. I'm writing a memoir about my family. Del has written many plays and done television and movies and that have taken your life, Del, and put that on paper.
Well, and others
as well. Sydney, the things that you write, we're just assuming that you have lived this quite wild and crazy sexual life. Either that or you somewhere along the line, you know what you're talking about. And of course, James, we do know that your story is very, very personal and some of the trauma that you grew up with and that you're remembering.
Yeah.
So with that, I want to dedicate this little episode to one of my favorite authors, and he's actually considered one of the finest late 20th century Southern literary giants, and that is Pat Conroy. Pat Conroy. He wrote Lords of Disciples, Prince of Tides, Great Santini, some lesser known works, South of Broad, Beach Music. I had the pleasure of listening to one of his lectures 10, 15 years ago. And this is kind of what we're going to be talking about today. Here's what he said. And it's a strange power a writer has, but the one thing that surprised me in writing is that with all the violence we endured, with all the craziness, and my God, my family is nuts, Pat Conroy said, that we even survived. There's something that moves me every time I get together with any of my siblings. We'll talk about mom and dad, but there's something about it that is quite moving to me in the fact that, we have forgiven them. And one of the things that I think is important as we continue this journey into writing is knowing when to forgive. We're putting things on paper that maybe aren't the best of times. Certainly they can be the worst of times, but can we forgive?
Not always. I think forgiveness is overrated. That's my philosophy. I do. I feel like, people, you can't go forward without forgiving. Sometimes you can go forward and you can sell 45 million albums like Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill, and still be angry and pissed off. And maybe she got to forgiveness. I don't know. But I do agree with you that sometimes it's therapeutic to write about it, and that elicits some forgiveness. To start understanding the characters in real life that you put on page, that then you put on the stage or whatever, then you go, oh my God, they were just human. They were just human. They did the best they could with what they were given.
You had some problems in the past, Del, haven't you, with your family or family members recognizing themselves or something?
Yeah, well, yes. I wanted to say one thing because you were quoting Pat Conroy. I love this quote by Anne Lamott, which says, "You own everything that happened to you. Tell your stories. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better." I just love that quote so much. Yeah, you know, when it happened to me when I wrote a little play that was in a 64-seat house in Hollywood, California, called Daddy's Dying, Who's Got the Will. I thought nobody would see it. My mother will come out. She's Lurleen in the play. It's her family. She'll be a little pissed off at me, but not too much. She comes off okay. The rest of the family, you know, there's some greed involved. And then the play just changed my life. I mean, it was one of those things that, you know, the reviews came out, and then MGM optioned it as a film, and I wrote the screenplay, and y'all, I didn't know how to tell my family. They would go, "Oh, Delford's got a play. Delford's got a movie coming out. We're all going to go see it." And I didn't know how to say, "Okay, brace yourself." And so I just didn't say anything. And it was probably a big mistake because, you know, my Aunt Rita didn't speak to me for 7 years. My Uncle Cecil died, never spoke to me again.
Oh.
So I didn't care.
I'm saying it's not always a tragedy.
Sorry.
That was not a bad thing. But we finally reconciled, my Aunt Rita and myself. And she said to me when she finally called me, she said, "I could deal with the fact that you made me an alcoholic. And I could deal with the fact that you made me lose custody of my children, but the fact that you made me wear the same outfit for 3 days in a row, that made me look like white trash." That was her big complaint.
Priorities.
So yeah, you can sometimes have some conflict maybe you get another play out of it. I don't know.
Well, James, what about, do you still have some of your family members living who will be reading your novel?
Reading, probably not. I have a number who are alive.
Are there any literate ones?
Literate, yes, technically. No, and this is my mother's side, Dad's family. We're not talking about you right now. My mother might read it, but you know what I did with my mom when I was in the middle of this book was I told her, you know, I'm writing a book that is loosely based on your family, and what I would like to do is ask you some questions about this. And so I interviewed my mom for about 2 hours on the phone, recorded, and again, it's not a memoir. It's not. You know, so much of it is fiction. I think a lot of people wouldn't even recognize the characters, you know, in my family, even knowing I wrote it. Were they to read it, wouldn't recognize it. For one, because they lack the self-awareness. They have they have sainted some of these people in their memory as a way of covering over their own trauma. And so when they hear about these horrible people, they're not going to recognize them. So unless they watch this YouTube video right here and realize that Mary is, in fact, Mary, I didn't change the name.
You didn't change the name? Well,
No.
I at least had the decency to change the name.
And I'm not making, mine have no names. It's just mom and dad.
But even with those very specific scenes that are based on true stories, I think, you know, my mom didn't remember a lot of the stories until I asked her specific questions. Just because, again, there's so much intentional or unintentional forgetting that goes behind it. So mine's a little different. Mine's very dark, and mine's related to a part of my family that is so illiterate and in the biggest sense of the term. Were I to lose anyone in my family, it would be somebody who's already lost to me anyway.
But James, you said that you know that they didn't want to remember, but perhaps they don't. They've blocked it, you know, because there is that condition where something, because there's some horrific things in your novel.
Yeah,
and I mean, for someone to live through them and then just block them out.
Right. Well, for instance, my grandmother, who is only a very minor character in the book because she's 7 in the book, is. If I were to ask my aunt about her, she would remember her as a church-going, godly woman. This woman was in an institute for the criminally insane 3 times. She killed multiple people. She shot my grandfather in the back of the head in the front yard. Like, when they talk about her, they talk about her like Jesus done walk across the lake and gave them a basket full of fishes. And I don't know where they get this from, because she was there. You know, she saw my mom have to go out in the front yard and fight the football team to defend her little brother.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, I just don't see it. It's more than a condition. It's they have created a vision in their head about the way these people were. That is, you know, the stories that I mention are stories that I heard from the mouths of the people that happened to them.
Mm.
Right.
So you are telling your story in their voice. Is that kind of right?
You know, I'm telling the story that they told me as I imagine it happening.
Do you think you're doing it out of revenge? I mean, is there a motive here?
There is a motive here. I mean, because again, you know, one of the very earliest times we talked about this, you know, one of the things that has always fascinated me because of my own experience with these people was this experience of evil. And I have always struggled to understand it. And so for me, it's trying to understand, one, how people can be as bad as they are, and two, how some people can spin out of that orbit and become okay. You know, because that's partially my story, right? Is that,
well, I mean, yeah. I mean, look at you. I mean, it's like, you know, you rose above. I mean, think about from whence you came.
Right.
Became.
I mean, like my mother graduated from high school, and she's a first generation person to do that. You know, so I'm the first generation of my family to go to college, to go to grad school, certainly to teach college.
To get a PhD, there's not even anyone close, is there? There's
nothing like it in my family, and so how outliers like that can happen, right? Betty is the outlier, and you know, so that was part of my motive for doing that, and to explore, you know, how it is that this kind of world spawns both the worst, and sometimes the good people too.
It also spawns a lot of sex. And with that,
we love a good segue.
I mean,
Sydney's is just free.
There is a lot of sex at James's, but it's not the kind of I wouldn't call it sex all the time.
No.
It's not the kind you necessarily want to have.
No, well, and it's not. It doesn't sound very experienced as well as the things that you're writing, Sydney. So, I mean, how true is what you're? How are you going to tell your parent? Are they going to read this?
So I'm not fully certain my dad knows what the internet is, so we're fine with that. My mom. So my entire family is very religious. In, you know, live, love, pray, signs on the bathroom wall religious.
Pieta statues.
Yes, Pieta statues.
They're Catholic. They're Catholic, right?
Mm-hmm. They are. So we're very sex negative. And so like this. So growing up, any, you know, reference to anything sexual came from romance novels or hiding books on my phone. So how my family will perceive this? I don't think I'll get written out of any wills. I'll be perfectly fine there. My mom loves me. But she's not going to read my work. She won't.
She won't read the book? You don't think she'll read the book?
No. Or I'll be like, Mom, here's a book with every single sexual thing highlighted. You can read around it. I think she'll read it then.
Well, there's like 5 pages left. 5.
The key is to make a cover so salacious that she'll know better than to open it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll have a shirtless man with, like, you know, a hotel key in his hand.
What about siblings? You have
an Italian.
Oh, I have siblings. My brother's not a big reader. My middle sister, Aunt Audrey, my youngest sister, she'll probably read it because she's goofy like that. I have aunts who will read it because they jumped on the 50 Shades of Grey train pretty easily and they liked it. Yeah, so I think it'll be a shock to a lot of my family members, especially because my genre, the authors, very rarely are front and center. I mean, that's true for any author, really. A writer is not exactly always front and center, but most of the time, you only ever see the author if they have a picture on the back cover talking about their love of their kids and, whatever. And so for me to be talking about it and be promoting it this way, or to be open about it, my real goal with this, and my family also, I think this is really where it's going to really get my family, is the feminist take on it. And that's like a dirty word in my family. We don't say feminist. And so that's really that's what would the family say? Kind of like when I came home and there was this, oh, you liberal college student undertone to anything they said to me that was in regards to, anything not conservative. And so that's kind of, there's like this side being sex and this side being a liberated woman in a book. That would be the kind of what would the family say.
I don't think that we've told our audiences that you're from Louisiana.
Yes.
James lives in Tennessee. Nancy is Dallas. I am a native Texan that has lived in California since 1980. So I think that has a lot to do with so much that Southern culture and that, that Louisiana Catholicism that you grew up with.
And like the heart of the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
Really right dead center right next to Texas. So yeah, it's definitely a cultural thing. Like I have relatives, extended cousins who will probably read it. I have female cousins who'll be like, oh, I love this. This was really great. And they'll talk to me and we might have something. But as far as my immediate family, especially with my mom, hi mom, you're probably watching this. Shout out to you. You're not going to read it. And I totally understand that. I know that there's still going to be a plate of mashed potatoes and meatloaf for me when I come home on holidays. So I'm not worried. I'm not worried about being disowned. My mom's not going to write a book trashing me or anything like that.
Cindy, I want to know, do you want your mom to read it?
Yes, I want my mom. I do. I want my mom to read it.
It's really good.
You can read it to her. Read.
Oh my God! Can you imagine reading that masturbation scene to your mother?
What about this side of it? For all of us. I mean, Sydney or some of your friends going to say, "Oh my God, is that me?" Or James, like
100%. I have friends who are going to think that they're Samson and they're Poppy and or whoever. I have a lot of my friends. I mean, I have a lot of wonderful friends in the LGBTQ community, and I have a lot of strong feminist friends who are going to love it and eat it up like candy. But as far as answering your original question, Nancy, when it comes to am I an experienced writer?
Yes. Pray tell.
Just say some things do take quite an imagination. They do.
I know, y'all. I mean, she was my student. She was my sweet little.
What did you do to her? What did you teach her?
I did not teach her this.
He wants to go back. He doesn't want them to think this is where it came from.
I'm very proud of you, Sydney. I really am. I mean, you were my student, and this is shocking to me, but I love it.
Oh, I know you do. You're like that. You're like the dad I wish would dive head first into what I'm writing. Oh yes. Yeah, but my dad, he's not a reader. I think my dad's dyslexic, so he's also not really a big reader. Unless it's made into a movie, and then no, he still won't go see it. But he'll be like, good job. I'm glad that you found a way to make money. I
think that the three of us, not Nancy, but the three of us have something in common because James said, oh, read? And then you said they're not readers. And then I was like, none of my family goes to theater. They're not going to watch my work. Nancy J, though,
my parents will find this in heaven or wherever they are. We can go to the library and check it out. God may tell them, but they don't want to read it. I mean, they're reader. We were readers.
Who's left, though, Nancy? I mean, now turning it on you. Who's
my
left?
Sister, and I have cousins and one aunt left. So that's really it. But I think it's important. I don't have anyone to fact check me. I mean, these are my memories. These are and what I am writing about, and it's something I think we all do when we're thinking about our families. We remember it in our own ways, And I've talked to my sister, about something else years and years ago. She doesn't remember the incident that I remember, my dad yelling. And she's like, I don't remember that. Well, he was yelling at her, and she's hard of hearing. So maybe that played into it. So that's a whole nother issue. But I feel like as long as I am being honest to myself and remembering it, I probably wouldn't remember it the same way today as I may have remembered it 5 years ago before they died. Right? James, isn't that kind of interesting because time skews us?
Well, it's to quote an ancient philosopher, you can't step into the same river twice.
Oh, that's good.
Right. So if I sit down today and try to ponder a moment in my past, it's going to mean something different to me because in 5 years I will have so much more experience. It will have changed the way that I look at it. And so that was going to be my objection to you: is what kind of fact checker is there even? God, who can tell you, your mind is wrong about this because, otherwise, to me, what you're writing about is the way that what you experienced affected you and the way that now your recreations of that are changing your views, right? That is the only fact. The only fact is, how does Nancy feel right now about these people?
Right. Sydney, you wrote down what James said, didn't you?
Yes, I have a Charlotte Webb book right here that I've been taking notes in my notepad.
But
in 2,000 years, they'll wonder, who is this philosopher that was writing Charlotte's Web?
But Nancy, the beauty of your book, and I've said this before, is that we all relate to it. And I don't think it's highly offensive on any level. I don't think that anybody who reads it will say, oh, he's an awful human being, or she's an awful human being. It's not like that at all. It's like they're flawed, beautiful characters from your point of view. And I don't find it offensive.
As I remember these incidents, some of them I think, I'm a grown up now. I get it. These things happen. It's just my whole my whole, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? My
worldview.
My worldview. I was going to say the morality that I may have felt about something as a kid is not the morality that I feel about it today.
No.
I understand things differently. So it's, I'll think of the word tonight.
Well, I think you see, there's something about our parents that are almost godlike, that they're these iconic creatures, and then what you have done is you've painted them as humans.
Yeah.
You've showed us the humanity, and without judgment. I love that you don't judge them. You just tell the stories.
Well, and it's not so much about what I remember, maybe, but why I remember it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I've been talking with my mom a lot because my grandfather, her dad, is being put in assisted care, and then we had to bury her mom a few months ago. And she's been talking a lot about her family, which we don't talk about very much. And so whenever I talk about our thing with her, and I always talk about y'all's individual books, she's a picky reader, but she's very interested in yours, Nancy. Like, my mom would be your audience to read about that family dynamic, to read about, seeing your parents as human, because she has, whenever I remember being younger and saying, Mom, if you ever
Sydney
die,
froze.
I froze?
Not on our end. Not over here.
Or did we all freeze, Nancy?
No,
it's just Nancy.
It's
I froze?
No,
you're not frozen. Keep talking, Nancy. We're all good. So if we're freezing, we're fine.
Okay,
I have a low battery. I need to plug in.
But what I was thinking is something interesting about this topic is, and Dell, you actually have this experience with your aunt writing that book. But like, if my mom came out with a erotic novel tomorrow, or if your relative or someone wrote a play and wrote you as a character, or James, if your mom were to write this book, or if Nancy can hear me, if your sister wrote this story, what would our perception be of it, of seeing ourselves through someone else's eyes? Or
that's so I love what you just said, because I remember when I wrote Southern Baptist Sissies, and my brother is a Baptist minister, and he said, "You act like our childhood was not great."
Aw.
He said, "You act like you." He said, "I don't remember it that way," and I said, "Because you were hearing something different than me. You were hearing a different sermon than me because you were straight. I was gay, so I was hearing the things that you didn't hear."
Yeah.
And so the perception is very, very different from every single person. It's almost like, okay, so when you go to therapy and you know, Nancy, you talk about you're in therapy, you're talking about your husband, which your ex-husband now. The therapist only knows your view
You're right.
of that person. So that's how, as writers, we are writing our view. We're
Mhm.
writing what we see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so we shouldn't be afraid. We should own our truth.
Yep. We're all adults here. What our family has to say doesn't affect us anymore. Well, my parents will pay my car insurance, so it might affect me. But we're all adults here.
If you get in trouble, you let me know, Sid.
I will.
Yeah, but
Also, if they cut you off, that's a great story. It'll pay your bills.
yes.
Everything is coffee.
Here's what I think we're trying to say. It's your story. Tell your story.
Mm-hmm.
Do not censor your story. Do not worry about perception. You know, it's easier to ask for forgiveness.
I was just going to say, I'm with you. You said
permission, right?
You said this at the beginning, Dale, and I agree with you. I think forgiveness is an overrated thing. I mean, you can forget, but why forgive, right?
I don't think you have to all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely not forgiven. I've not forgiven the people that are in my book, even the ones that I try not to judge them as I'm writing them, but I also haven't forgiven them.
Yep, that makes for a juicier story.
Maybe you'll forgive them when you make a lot of money out of the novel. Then you'll say, "Okay, all is forgiven."
I don't think I have anything to forgive because, like we've talked about, everyone is just doing the best that they can. And fortunately, no one got killed over it, James.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a little different circumstances over on Hell's Holler.
Did?
Yeah.
What?
In Nancy's family.
In my family.
Got killed in your family, Nancy, but James has a lot of murders in his family.
I know, that's why I'm saying, so that, I mean,
But I think something that Nancy was talking about earlier about the like Dell said, forgiveness is overrated, and then you said you're older now. I think, forgiveness shouldn't always be our goal. Maybe understanding should be. Like, especially me, growing up as an adult, I'm like, oh, my parents, yada, yada, yada. But now that I'm living with a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, I'm like, oh, my gosh, get over it. All they did was slam the door. So understanding.
Right. But it seems like all of us look at life differently because of our writing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, and exactly like Sydney said, right? Like, I have struggled to understand the people. Understanding them better helps me feel less passionately about them, but it doesn't make me feel better about them.
Yeah.
Now I know why you did what you did. I can understand the mechanisms by which you were led to hurt these people, but you still did. Which
goes to the psychology of understanding your characters. You must understand the psychology of every single character that you write.
Yeah.
You can't just throw them out there and say, "Oh, no, you have to understand."
Because if there's a gap, it will bite you.
Oh, God, now I'm going to have to do something else, Dale. Now I've got to understand them.
Paging Dr. Freud.
Paging Dr. Freud.
This has been like a therapy session. Thank you, Nancy J., for this therapy session that you've brought us all to.
No, thank you. Thank you on behalf of Pat Conroy. Thank you. I mean, he's a good example of someone who was able to write he actually ended up forgiving his father all of the horrible things. Maybe forgiving is the wrong word, but they got together. They actually wrote a book together later. So James, if there's anyone left in your family, who knows? Maybe writing a book with him someday.
Yeah. What would be nice if we could lead a discussion one day about using writing as therapy and something that through our writing we've come to understand about ourselves. I think that would be a rich topic.
That is. It's a
I
rich
like that.
topic. See, you don't sound like an amateur anymore.
My 10-cent words.
Rich.
The philosopher's been rubbing off on her.
There you go. There you
Oh.
go.
I love The Prince of Tides, by the way. One of my favorite novels by Pat Conroy.
Yeah.
The Prince of Tides.
The Barbra Streisand, Nick Nolte movie. That is still one of my favorite movies, too.
I love that moment where they all discover, all the siblings that are left, discover that the mother had said, I'm going to tell you a secret. Don't tell your brothers and say, you're my favorite. And she told every single one of them.
You're my favorite. You're my favorite. Yes.
So you telling me when my mama says that to me, she really be lying?
That's a whole nother discussion, Miss Sydney Gilder. James Brady Joyce. I think we should say goodnight.
I think it's good time.
Mm-hmm. Eat your vegetables, take your vitamins.
And write your story.
Write your story.